Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the juice was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla, I'm a killer. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Oversight Live. I am Ben Carpenter, and we're going to get busy. Okay, what's Oversight Live? I keep reminding you every time we kick this off, that our state capitol in Alaska and our legislature is only accessible by plane and by ferry, and it's prohibitively expensive for both time and money for people, regular people, to go provide oversight. So we got a bigger challenge in Alaska than most of the rest of the United States. So Oversight Live can be your road to Juneau until a real one can be built. A lack of a road is a major problem for us, but with today's technology, it's no longer a valid excuse for not knowing what's going on. So we're going to bring you relevant content, relevant and convenient content, so that you can be informed and educated with the actual truth without having to travel to Juneau or filtering the liberal media bias out of what you read and listen to. You will have my bias, and I am unabashedly a limited government, a fiscal conservative, and a social conservative. So take that for what it's worth. You have the opportunity to engage with me and with other Alaskans live while we're going through the motions here. Just text in your question or comment in your YouTube chat window there, and I'm going to get the message here, and we'll do our best to respond and have a dialogue. If you're watching this recording and you have questions, then drop me an email, producer@oversightlive.com, and I'll do my best to answer your question. If you've got good questions, odds are others have got the same question. And so I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna show people what the question is and try to answer it so that we edify everyone. This is we're going to try to have fun, and we make it more fun when we have people participating, and many hands make light work of trying to figure out what's going on in our government. I spent 6 years in the legislature, in the state legislature here in Alaska, and I learned a lot. I don't want that experience and that what I learned to go to waste, so I'm going to do my best to share with you what I know. I'm not going to know everything, but I will do my best to find the answers if I don't know. Anyway, let's get started today. So we're going to do two things, one of which is a response to somebody who asked a question and wanted to know what was going on in Senate Finance today. So we're gonna talk about taxes just a little bit in Senate Finance, and then following yesterday's show, I went to the court's website and I looked at their request for public comment on the changes that they're making to Court Rule 6 and 6.1, which deal with grand juries. Okay, so we're going to dive into that as well. Question coming in: are we going to talk about 227? Yes, Tawny, let's talk about 227. Why don't we go that first? Because it appears multiple of you are interested in 227. Are you interested in knowing what's going on with taxes? That meeting is not so the Senate Finance talked about Senate Bill 212, which is something to do with the number of Superior Court judges. I haven't read that bill. And they also talked about Senate Bill 227 in that committee, and it's about an hour and a half long committee. I think about halfway through they started talking about Senate Bill 227, and so we can pick it up right there and listen for a little bit, and pause. You can ask your questions of what they're saying, and then we can jump over here 30 minutes from now on talking about the Supreme Court and the court rules, because it's important for people to understand what's going on with the court rule changes, and they're seeking your opinion on what they're doing. So you need to be informed, and they need to hear from you. Okay, so let's jump over to Senate Finance here, since you guys, this is what's on your mind. Okay, here we go. Let me make this a little bigger for you. And let's go here. Bam. There we go. Okay. So who is presenting the bill right now is Senator Kathy Giesel out of Anchorage. And she is, I guess, co-sponsoring the bill, or Senator Welkowski and his staff are going to be talking about some of the other portions in the bill. But she's the one that's up right now introducing the bill. And where we're going to pick up is right when they start talking about the education head tax, which is basically the beginning.
Tax is proposed. This was in effect in our state up to 1980. Again, three of us sitting at this table were employees at that time and paid this. It was a flat tax taken out of every employee's first paycheck. What we're proposing here is that it would come out of the third and fourth paychecks of the year. And it's a bracketed education head tax, Mr. Chairman. Originally, back in the day, we paid $10 per person. This would bracket it. Less than $30,000 a year would have a $20 tax per year. So $10 theoretically out of the third paycheck of the year, and another 10 out of the fourth. Then the bracket moves, as you can see, 30,000 to 90,000 would be a $30 per year tax, 90 to 150, and then above 150. You can actually, the last bullet point points out that actually this type of tax initially began in 1919 here in Alaska, Mr. Chairman. So it's not a new idea at all.
Okay, so they're pointing out that if you end up paying this tax here, that last bullet saying that you're actually doing better off than if we had just kept the tax that was originally on the books. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things here just to level the bubble. The slide is titled Education Head Tax. So the question in many people's minds probably like, what does it mean to be a head tax? And then the bullets, after it says basic, how is it going to be implemented? So then it says flat tax. And then it says tax rates change. And then we're talking about the education head tax adjusted for inflation in the second bullet. So what is it actually, what kind of a tax is it actually? Is it a head tax, a flat tax, an income tax? Because we're talking about based on income. So let's just parse through that for a second. All right. So my understanding of a head tax is that everybody that's going to be working, like if you're drawing a paycheck, you get taxed. It's a head tax per person. Okay. That's what a head tax is called. Now, this particular tax is also based on your income. So if you're working, you're going to pay a tax, but if you're working and only making less than 30,000, you only pay 20. So it's kind of a graduated or progressive head tax. Okay. So the head tax portion is because this $20, $30, $40, $60 doesn't change. It's not a percentage of your income. So you can't, it's not a direct comparison to an income tax that has a rate and you pay more based on how much you earn. This is a flat tax, being that it is the dollar figure doesn't change, but it does change based on how much you make. So it's, how would you call it? Like the slide doesn't really do a good job of describing what it actually is. Is it a head tax? Is it a flat tax? Is it an income tax? You've got all three of those things on this slide. So the way that I rationalize this, and the way that I would just, as we're working this out right now, I would call this a progressive flat tax. Okay. That's what I would call it. Maybe there's a better name for it, but that's what I would call it in my mind. That would help me understand that it's a progressive, meaning the more you make, the more you pay. And it's a flat tax. You're only paying a certain dollar figure depending on how much you make. So you can count on that every year. If you're starting out in life or don't make a whole lot, I guess, 30,000 or less, your tax is only ever going to be $20. Those that are high earners, and that's classified here in this chart as 150,000 or more, you'll pay $60 a year. And that comes out it's interesting how we would set this up. I'm not even sure how. Anyway, let's not digress too far down in the weeds, but they're templating here, and it'd probably be in the law that says that employers would have to pull this money out of employees' checks on the third check and the fourth paycheck. And I think this is a throwback to the first education tax that was in the state, where you paid it the first of the year. Your first paycheck of the year, you paid your head tax, your education tax, and then you didn't pay anything more the rest of the year because it was just a $20 or whatever it was. I guess in 1919 it was a $5 flat education tax. Okay, so that's what the education tax is.
It's a pretty common bill or tax. We know that education financing is an important question that we're constantly dealing with, and you yourself, Mr. Chairman, have proposed creating an education fund. Next slide. We believe that the revenue generated, this estimate was created by Ben Goltz, my Dartmouth College intern, estimated about $11.5 million in income. You'll see in the fiscal note, he was very close. They estimate 11 to 14 million per year. So that's the education head tax. The S corporation tax, Mr. Chairman,
you're going too fast.
Is financing is an important question that we're constantly dealing with, and you yourself, college
I want to stop
intern.
there for a second. Okay, so I'm not sure whether there's any questions on this slide, but I do see that we got a question that's asking how long, and I assume what you're asking is how long is the tax going to be in effect? From implementation until infinity, like it starts whenever they pass the bill and then it goes every year forever. Yes, that's the way it would be. My understanding. The argument that Kathy Giesel's making is that education needs sustainable funding. So you wouldn't have a tax, you wouldn't implement a tax that is only good for 1 year or 10 years, and then afterwards it wouldn't be, because then it wouldn't be sustainable after 10 years. So I haven't read the bill, but I would assume that they're instituting this tax and it would continue in perpetuity. Okay, so this, in theory, because we're calling it a education tax, in theory, this would raise almost $11.5 million estimated for education. Okay, so this is going to be a question subject to the committee here in a few minutes, and we'll see how they work through this.
estimated about 11,500.
Come on, 11,000.
11.5 million dollars in income. You'll see in the fiscal note he was very close. They estimate 11 to 14 million per year. So that's the education head tax. The S corporation tax, Mr. Chairman, is one that I believe this committee has heard before. Also, right now, C corporations are taxed through a corporate income tax. We follow the method that the federal government uses, and the federal government does not tax S corporations as the same type of entity as a C corp. They tax S corporations, which are privately owned with 100 or less employees, through the owner's income tax. Because Alaska has no income tax, S corporations are virtually tax-free.
We like it that way. You can hear it dripping out of her pores that those people, they're getting away with something because they're not paying their tax. Our state corporate income tax that C corps are taxed is a progressive income tax, progressive corporate income tax. I didn't pull up the statute to show you where the graduations are, but at a certain level, you don't pay any tax. Then you start paying a tax. Starts out, I think, at 2%, maybe 3%, 2%, I think. And then it maxes out at a little over 9%. And that 9% mark is for the C corporations that make the most money. Okay. So it's a progressive. Large corporations, they pay the 9%. And that 9% figure is one of the highest in the nation. And she's right. S corps, if you are an S corp for IRS purposes, your corporation income passes through to your personal income tax. So depending on how good you do at your S corporation, you are paying taxes. It's not like you're not paying taxes to the federal government. You're just not paying it to the state tax because there's no income tax to the state. But if you're an employee or an owner of a C corp, you don't pay income tax, personal income tax either. It's just that corporate entity pays the tax. But again, and this is missing the whole point. If the corporation, if the business is going to pay a tax, they're going to pass the cost of that tax. It's a cost of doing business. They're going to pass it on to the consumer, right? It's just the consumer ends up paying the tax anyway.
In terms of corporate taxes, this bill would institute a tax that matches C corporation taxes. Next slide. It would begin, again, this would close a loophole. 1980 is when we repealed. 1980 is when we repealed our personal income tax. Next slide. So the S corporation tax would begin. Again, it's bracketed with a company making more than $1 million a year in net income. Next slide. Does the next slide have? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that's not net income. She's getting her facts configured confused because she doesn't know what she's talking about. It is either net income or net profit, but what's written here is $1 million net profit. So the taxable floor, the minimum you would have to make as an S corp to get taxed, as what the slide is saying, is $1 million net profit. Expands the taxable floor down to 1 million, meaning it's expanding downwards to make the floor more people have to pay, right? So from 5 million to, there are fewer companies that are doing business that have net profit of 5 million than there are 1 million. So we're expanding the number of people who have to pay. Okay.
Again, it's bracketed with a company making more than $1 million a year in net income. Next slide. Does the next slide have? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, we are scrambling a bit on this. $1 million, less than $1 million a year in gross net revenue would pay 0. Above 1 million to 2 million a year would have a 5% corporate tax. 2 to 3 million would have a 6%. 3 to 4 would be 7. 4 to 5 would be 8%. And at 5 or more million would be the 9.4%. These can be found on pages 21 to 22 of the bill in front of you. Again, version G, Gollivan, section 4 of the bill.
So
next slide, please.
That's a state income tax for people who own businesses. That's a state income tax for people who own S-corp businesses, and you're going to pay just shy of 10% to the state if you're making over $4 million or $5 million, whatever she was saying. Okay, is this the graph that she was just talking to us about? Hypothetical 1. Okay, I'm not sure what, this is not the same chart that she was just talking about. So they are discombobulated.
And this is a hypothetical presentation of it. Next slide. Lastly, the piece I'm going to present to you is the 15 cent per barrel surcharge per barrel of oil going down taps. Mr. Chairman, this bill 227 was originally proposed by Governor Dunleavy, and this piece was in the bill. This was preserved. We know that the Dalton Highway requires significant maintenance, Mr. Chairman, especially in the spring and fall when there's a lot of water and erosion issues. And this 15 cent surcharge, we in this bill indicate we intend for this to go toward the Dalton Highway maintenance, Mr. Chairman. This shows
that makes it easier
some of the
sell,
anticipated income from it at about $28.5 million. And this would go a long way toward maintaining that road. And those are the 3 elements of the bill I'm going to present, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it over now to Senator Wielechowski and his staff.
Do we have any questions of Senator Giesel at this point? Senator Stedman.
On a couple different sections. School head tax. Can we go back to that slide, please? The school head tax with the dollar amount. And as I recall, wasn't the school head tax $100 at the time back in the day when it was terminated? Could you help me with that, what it was?
Senator Stedman, it was $10 a day, but if you put it into inflation, it would be about $100 a day now.
Yeah, $100 per person, yeah.
Per person, you are correct. Per person, I'm sorry, per person, yes.
Yeah.
It is true that is not the high level that I'm proposing here. This obviously is before the committee. It is now your bill to amend as you wish. I went with lower amounts just sort of as a starter for discussions.
Senator Stedman.
She's got, okay. I put forward a fiscal plan, and I took other people's bills and I created my own bills and I put this plan together. Okay. Let me explain something to you. If you're going to tax somebody because you think that you don't have enough money, what good is it to just institute a tax? This is your plan, right? We got a problem. The government doesn't have enough money. And so the best thinking that we can come up with is, well, let's just add more taxes. And then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, how many taxes, how much money are we short? Because it wouldn't do any good to just, or it would do some good, but it wouldn't do a lot of good It wouldn't solve the whole problem is what I'm trying to say. If I created a tax that only gave us like 10% more money, right? So when Senator Giesel says, well, I just picked a starting point here to send it to my colleagues, right? Okay, so there's not really a plan. Oh, it makes, we were projecting that it's going to make $11.5 million. Okay, well, what's the deficit? This is your plan. And you've prefaced this at the beginning by saying, hey, we're going to have a spending limit as well, okay? So your plan is with your head taxes is to raise $11 million. And then your plan with your oil tax is going to raise a couple tens of millions of dollars. And Wielkowski's got some bills that are going to raise. Are you talking about raising $1 billion in taxes? Because that's what you would have to communicate to people if your plan is to solve the problem that the state has right now with taxes. Or if you're not wanting to solve the problem and you're just wanting to tax people, you just want more money, then you go at it a different way and you say, well, you know what? People are going to have a hard time saying no to a tax that's, it's only 20, 30, 40, 60 bucks and it's for education. So people have a hard time saying no to that, right? We got an idea to put an additional tax on taps on the flow of oil. You know what? People know that the Dalton Highway needs maintenance. So let's say it's for the Dalton Highway, and then it's harder to argue because we know it needs that, right? But it's not actually solving the problem that the legislature is supposed to be trying to fix, right? Because the deficit that we have, if you count all of our revenue, including permanent fund earnings, and then compare it to the outgo of spending that the state wants, you're $1 billion. You're $1.1 billion, 1.1 plus $1 billion short. So we're going to go through the motions and we're going to waste a bunch of time. This meeting's an hour and a half long, and we're going to talk about taxes that just kind of scratch at the surface. They're not fixing anything. They're not fixing anything. And we'll get to it. We'll let them introduce this, but the concept of we'll spend it on education, this budget on Dalton Highway. Yeah, that's Barbara Streisand, as Rush used to call it. Let's go back to the meeting.
No, that's fine. And then can we jump to the table on subchapter S?
Yes.
Because it went by so fast. And that, was there consideration of starting that number instead of at $1 million at a higher amount, or why did you select the starting rate at $1 million? And for those watching at home that aren't as familiar with subchapter S, it's taxed as normal income versus a corporate income tax. It's just personal income. We have no personal income tax, right? That's where the comment came with that. It's, tax, there's no tax on it. But can you help me with that, is why that wasn't? And then is there any idea how many companies might, or how many people might fall into some of the upper brackets, the 10 million or the 25 million or the 6 million bracket?
Through the chair, thank you, Senator Stedman. My original concept of the bill was starting at a net income of 5 million. I bracketed it to go lower through input from colleagues here in the Senate. You can see the comparison to the existing C Corps and what the S Corps would be paying comparably. You asked how many people would, people, because this would be taxing the individual company owners, would fall into each bracket. And I cannot answer that question because that information is held confidential by the Department of Revenue. I can tell you that the indirect expenditure report from 2024 identified that there are approximately 11,700 companies that fall into the S Corp or LLC category in our state.
Until you create
where
this
they
tax.
would distribute.
Until you create this tax, and then you'll have fewer.
Distribute in this income level, I can't tell you because that information is not publicly available to us.
Senator Stedman.
And I'm just curious on that, because it makes it where we're flying blind. Is there,
By the way,
how do we get that data?
Senator Stedman and
To
Senator
have a
Giesel
discussion
are
on
not
these
best
rates,
friends.
or do we do what they do in Washington, pass the bill and then find out what's in it?
Senator
In
Giesel.
Washington, D.C.,
You've got no plan, Senator
Mr.
Giesel.
Chairman, in response to that question, essentially that would somewhat answer the question. I can tell you that in the spring revenue sources book for this year, petroleum corporate revenue taxes brings in 160 million. It's projected in the spring forecast to be 210 million for FY27. So this S corporation tax would apply to any companies who are producing or transporting oil and gas. I believe we can probably name some companies on the slope that are producing throughout the state, actually, who are producing oil. We know that the potential builder of a gas pipeline is also an S corporation. So it could amount to a substantial amount of additional revenue, Mr. Chairman. Senator Stedman.
Senator Stedman. Thank you, Senator Stedman. Any further questions of Senator Giesel? Senator Kaufman.
Thank you. To Senator Giesel on that last topic, transporting, could that include, I don't know, a business transporting fuel oil to people's houses? Would they be considered in the business of transporting hydrocarbons?
Senator Giesel.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kaufman, no, they are not considered transporting.
Okay,
Senator
so I
Kaufman.
missed something on a slide.
Can you explain?
I'm gonna love this line of questioning here, but so I thought that the S corp tax was applying to all S corps, but it appears that the S corp tax is just to the oil industry.
Why that's not so?
It'd help if I read the bill.
Senator Giesel.
The bill
It'd help if she read the
is
bill.
intended, if it's not specific enough, it could be modified to be that this would be via pipelines,
She doesn't know. She doesn't
pipelines
know.
or other substantial transportation. I'm sorry,
I'd
I
have to
can't
read my
answer the
bill.
question at the moment.
We can delve into that further. Senator Kaufman.
On the other topic of what's being called the education tax, if we could go back, was stated to be a head tax, but it has progressivity in it. That's hard to say in the morning. It looks like a progressive income tax. And so head taxes, and we're on the wrong slide now, but the other slide that showed that table, I'm just curious, if it's a head tax, why is it, when I think of charging by the head, it's if you're going in a movie theater, you pay whatever the price of a theater is now, $10 a head, or it's probably 15 or something these days. And so that's kind of a head toll, but they don't charge me to go into the theater on the basis of how much income I've made. So could you just explain how the progressivity correlates with anything that's properly defined as a head tax?
Senator Giesel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 27 of version G is chapter 45. It says education tax. That's what's officially in the bill. I apologize for the error on the slide, which refers to it as a head tax.
Thank you, Senator Giesel. Senator Kaufman.
She has no idea what she's doing.
Now that we're calling it an education tax, is there a mechanism in this that actually directs this, whatever revenues directly to education?
Senator Giesel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because we can't designate funds, there is only intent language. However, this committee's
No, that's not correct, Senator. We can designate funds all day long, and we do lots of times. What we can't do is dedicate funds. That's what I think you are meaning. We dedicate funds all the time. Look, we dedicated the funds coming out of the permanent fund to the PFD program, and we just ignore that. So if you're about to tell us that we're going to dedicate funds coming out of the education tax to education, I can tell you the legislature can just choose to ignore that.
chairman had the vision for an education fund, and this bill could certainly be amended to direct the money into that
Could.
fund.
Thank you, Senator
Or
Keesel.
could
Senator
not.
Kaufman.
Thank you. So as it stands, it's up there, at least it's called a head tax, but it's actually a progressive income tax. And it's called an education tax, but it doesn't actually direct funds directly to an education account. It goes into the general fund. And as I understand, we haven't gotten to the fiscal note yet, but the fiscal note describes tremendous infrastructure to be built for tax accounting, for
You're
assessing
going to have to hire people.
people's income. So it looks for all the world like the framework for progressive income tax that's being called, at least sometimes casually, an education head tax that isn't actually directed towards an education fund at the present time. And it's got all the hallmarks of a progressive income tax. So I just want to be sure that we're
He wants to
letting
hang
folks
around
that
her
might be
neck.
listening and watching know exactly what we have here as it's currently being presented in this bill.
Thank you, Senator Kaufman. Further questions of Senator Kiesel at this point? Senator Stedman.
Just for clarity, I can't remember, I'm sure I paid that education tax in the day. But it was just a set flat amount and no income requirement? Is
Mr.
that correct?
Chairman.
Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Stedman, that is correct. However, I have reluctance in assessing folks making less than $30,000 a year the same amount as someone making more than $150,000 a year. In addition, Senator Stedman, Mr. Chairman, we have approximately 25% of the working people in the state of Alaska who don't live here. This is all revenue that is being put into their paychecks and leaving our state, where they pay taxes in another state that support their schools. This is a small piece coming out of those paychecks.
So people that don't live here, they don't drive on our roads, they don't have kids in our schools, they don't use our police force, but yet they should pay for it. They come here and do us a service. They enable our oil companies to pump out our oil out of our ground that those companies pay royalties on. And you want to make it less attractive for those employees that come out of state to help us do that, because we don't have enough employees in the state of Alaska to do it ourselves. So you want to disincentivize people from the lower 48 coming up here and making the big bucks. I know we're talking $20. Well, no, we're not talking $20. We're talking $60 because those are good paying jobs, right? So what's the big deal of $60, right? Well, it's $60 today. It'll be $120 before you know it. But the principle of the matter is that you are salivating over people who are coming to this state who don't pay taxes, and you don't think it's fair.
To pay for Alaska's school education system.
You don't have kids in our school
If
system.
projects go forward as are being envisioned, that number of out-of-state employees, non-resident employees, is going to mushroom, just like it did during TAPS. 3 of us were here, working people during those years of TAPS construction. We know how many
She's
people
so entitled.
were here. We paid an income tax at the time, and we paid an education tax. That's what I'm trying to envision for the future, Mr. Chairman, Senator Stedman, members of the committee.
Senator Stedman.
This is a follow-up. I think I'd be just kind of interested, if we had a $100 flat head tax for everybody that has an income over $30,000, what that would look like. If at all possible, in the thoughts. I don't disagree with Senator Kaufman. The appearance of a income tax structure is pretty close.
Maybe we get that information for the committee. Senator Keel.
It just hurts
Thank
our
you,
heart.
Mr. Chairman.
It hurts our heart
I guess
that
we-
somebody that doesn't make a lot of money would have to pay more, the same amount as somebody who makes a lot of money. It just is, it breaks our heart. It's unfair.
should probably just think a little bit about what things are and what they aren't. A progressive, would an income tax apply to only the first two checks, or would an income tax apply to a person's income?
It's
However
in
you
this
set
bill,
it
it's
up.
proposed only to the first, the third, and the fourth paychecks. Originally, of course, it was on our first paycheck. That's all.
So, thank you. Would a progressive income tax raise more total dollars from someone with an income of $250,000 a year than $151,000 a year?
Well, I would suppose so, Mr. Chairman, Senator Keel.
Okay, so we're not in fact talking about a progressive income tax at all. We're talking about a kind of tax with a variable rate, but clearly we're talking about a capitated tax and not a progressive income tax at all. That's helpful. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you, Senator Keel. Further questions? Senator Kaufman.
Capitated
Thank you.
tax.
I just want to double check. So we're talking about only earned income. So that would be W-2 or self-employed income as currently envisioned. Is this including folks on Social Security or living off of savings?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kaufman, that is correct. These come out of paychecks, self-employed as well as the average employee.
Thank you, Senator Giesel. Thank you, Senator Kaufman. Senator Stedman.
Just one cautionary note, Mr. Chairman, and plugging another issue we're working here, that I think when we look at vehicle car rental tax, that was supposed to be directed to marketing, and that gets side channeled quite often. This could very well be the same situation. So just food for thought with the other concept that the committee's looking at, giving the public the opportunity to dedicate funds. That would then be directed, if something like this was tied to that or something else. But in the event it's just designated or inferred in the legislation, it would be an ongoing discussion at the table every year, because there might be other ideas to spend the revenue on.
Thank you, Senator
Yes.
Stedman. Further questions? Senator Keel.
Just a little mechanical question about how this works. A lot of folks work seasonally, different jobs through the year. So if the third and fourth paycheck of the year come January or February, excuse me, and then somebody switches jobs and
Good
works
question.
a summer job, does it get taken out and then refunded? Do they tell the employer? How mechanically, how's that work?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Keel, there's provision for reimbursement of if it's levied multiple times inappropriately. Yes, there are provisions for refunding.
Thank you.
Wow. So you're
Thanks,
going to pay the
Senator Keel.
tax and then get it back.
Move forward to hear
You're
from
going to give the state a loan.
Senator Willikowski. Thank you, Senator
Interest-free
Giesel.
loan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Bill Willikowski, State Senator for East Anchorage, and I'm joined by David
Okay.
Dunsmore and Sonia Kawasaki. I want to talk about two provisions. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I will talk about these two items. The first one is a change to the oil tax structure. We've been told for many years by many of our consultants that we have the most complex oil tax structure in the world.
That's true.
And we have a system now that has tax credits, gross value reductions, carry forwards, provisions that allow the industry to potentially drive their tax rate to 0%. In fact, we have the Willow Project, a project that every one of us supported a number of years ago, is on federal land, and that is a project that is estimated to be costing the people of Alaska between $250 million, $300 million per year, possibly more, because the company gets to write off all of their expenses off of their Alaska production taxes, even though we ultimately, when it goes into production, we receive no royalties on that. We receive no royalties because it's on federal land, NPRA. And then the production taxes, because it's on also a new developed project, federal land, the gross value reduction applies. That's another provision that is in our current law, which allows companies to drive their tax rate down to potentially zero. We've been told by the Department of Revenue, you've been told by the Department of Revenue, that 40% of the new oil going forward in the future, not immediately, but it's kicking in over the next few years, roughly 40% of the new oil will be under this gross value reduction provision, which will potentially drive the tax rate down to zero. And we can see the impacts of our tax structure by just simply looking at the 2026, and this is the fall revenue forecast, but you can see we had $9.5 billion of taxable barrels. This is a 2026 fall forecast, $9.5 billion worth of oil going through the pipeline, for which under the fall forecast, and I know it's been changed under the spring forecast, but I think it's still illustrative of the impacts. We were projected to receive $323.5 million in production taxes. That is a tax rate of 3.3%. We have a gross floor of 4%, but we're not receiving even the gross floor. We're receiving lower than that under our fall forecast projections. And so we have a system that is extremely complex, is not getting us what we were promised, and is quite frankly costing us huge amounts of money. And a lot of promises were made by the industry to get this system, Mr. Chairman. You all remember them. The public all remembers them, because we had two attempts by the citizens to reverse this. We had one was a referendum and one was a citizens initiative. And in the first one, we were told we were going to get more jobs and more oil, and it was going to be good for Alaska. And instead, we've lost billions of dollars. The peak of jobs occurred in August of 2014, which was coincidentally the month of the initiative, or the referendum, where the people tried to overturn the oil tax changes in Senate Bill 21. And 15,300 jobs at that point, 15,300 jobs in August of 2014. Where are we today? We're at about 9,000 jobs. And the industry is actually celebrating, because that's an increase of a couple thousand jobs from where we were just a few years ago. 9,000 jobs. And 40% of those jobs, according to the Department of Labor, are not Alaskan residents. 40% of the jobs, not Alaska residents. So that means we've got roughly 5,400 Alaskans who are working in the industry. And for that, we're giving hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks every single year. We're getting a 3.3% gross value tax. This is far lower than I would venture to guess any oil jurisdiction in the world gets for their oil, Mr. Chairman. And so the question that we've struggled with for years as a state is, well, what is getting the maximum value for our resource? That's what the Constitution tells us is our obligation. People talk about, well, we should get our fair share. Actually, that's not the standard. The standard is that we get the maximum value for our resource. That's what the Constitution tells us we need to do. And so we've wrestled with that concept for many years. And so what we've done with this bill is we've gone to a gross tax, and we looked at, well, what do they do in Texas, North Dakota, which is someplace that we've always been compared to. We've looked at what we've historically gotten. For years, for decades, actually, we had a 12.5% gross. What this amendment and what this bill does is goes to a 17.5% gross. How did we get 17.5% gross? Which, by the way, we currently have a 35% net tax. This goes to a 17.5% gross tax. And so we looked at a few things. Number one, we looked at, well, what did Governor Hammond say? We've all heard Governor Hammond famously said it should be a third, a third, a third. And, and right now, by our calculations, we're getting roughly 16% of the gross value of the oil. How do we?
Okay, I've reached my limit of being able to listen to Senator Wielechowski. Again, the question that I posed when we were talking about Senator Giesel's plans for taxes about, does this solve the problem that we have? And no, it doesn't. Even if you're talking a couple $100 million of taxes, which of course, from the state's perspective, from the budgeter's perspective, a couple $100 million, that's nothing to shake your head at. I mean, that's more money we get to spend, right? And theoretically, you could have a couple $100 million less pressure on the PFD, maybe. Okay, so I'm not poo-pooing the value of it, but you have a $1 billion+ deficit that you're trying to fill, and you're scratching at the surfaces with some Band-Aid solutions. Okay, that's what you're doing. That's the best that you could do, because your plan isn't to fill the gap. Your plan is to just institute taxes. So why would we just be instituting taxes? So let me show something else for you. This Democrat that's proposing oil taxes belongs to this political party. And I've showed this before, but it bears. So this is from 2022. This is when Biden was in office. And we're talking about under the cover of climate change. Whereas, blow. Be it further resolved that the Biden administration must end the era of fossil fuel production and use all its tools at its disposal to avert climate devastation in Alaska due to oil development. Encourage the oil industry in Alaska to re-engineer itself and invest in renewable energy. So Hillcorp and ConocoPhillips, they need to put up windmills instead of drilling oil wells. Phase out fossil fuel production, leases, and permits on public lands and waters. Okay. So this Democrat here that we're watching, right? I'm just not quick enough with my my things to jump back and forth here. This nice face here is saying that the need here, it's not to fill the deficit. It's not a plan to fill the deficit and to fix the state's financial problems. It's to implement a tax. And he has been a champion of oil taxes for as long as I can remember. Okay. Well, how do you encourage oil companies to go somewhere else? How do you encourage them to go somewhere else? You regulate them out of business. You tax them out of business. And you make it as expensive as possible. And then they find somewhere less expensive to do their business. Or they just go out of business if they can't, right? So there's an ulterior motive here with the political persuasion that exists in this state to make it as expensive and as hard as possible for oil industry to do what oil industry does. So we're not solving the fiscal problem of the state, but we're going to throw some taxes at it and call it responsible government. And we've already had the conversation about mismanagement of state government. And that's not a focus of this committee. It's not a focus of this legislator. The solution that's being presented here by this Republican and this Democrat, and I say Republican loosely because there's nothing Republican about her, is just to add taxes. Just add taxes. Just tax more from people who aren't paying their way. They need to pay more. And it doesn't solve the problem that we have. It just gives us more money. Okay. We're going to shift. We're going to jump over here to the courts. All right, let me back up here because let me see if I can back. No, I can't. This is going to do you no good unless you know how to go find it. All right. So we want this page first. No, we don't. We want the page that is the website, not the PDF. Let's see. Nah, that'll get us there. This is not the court's. Okay. This is not okay. So let's look over here. Courts.alaska.gov is how you get here. Okay, this is the courts. Go to rules. You've got all of your criminal rules. If you want to find the rules dealing with grand juries or whatever, you look in the criminal procedures. But if you scroll down here, they're notifying you of changes that have happened, recent rule changes. You can read those and understand what they're doing. And then it says request for comment. So this is what I wanted to show you tonight. Both of these links here are dealing with grand juries. Both of them are linked to the same document. And that's the document that I had up just a minute ago. Okay. So let me get back to that document. Should be request for comment. There you go. All right. Let me make it bigger. All right. So the Alaska Supreme Court is seeking comment for two rules that are being changed. You can read through this, and they're identifying the way that they make the changes is the legislative style. So if they're proposing new language, it's got an underline, and if it's striking through something, it's deleting it. Okay? So when you read it with underlines as adds, strike throughs as deletes. Pretty easy because strike through is a delete. It's clearly a delete. All right. So what their proposed changes are going to be is for Criminal Rule 6.1 mostly, and then a little bit of Criminal Rule 6. Okay, you can click on these and it'll take them to you. I'm going to scroll down through this and show you a few things. Okay, so Criminal Rule 6.1 follows, right? It's 6.1. It follows 6. But they're starting with this because it's just dealing with the reports, and that's where they think is the largest issue that's going on right now. Okay, so the process that they're going through to seek your input is to tell you that there is history here and to explain the history to you, which is good. You want to have context before you're asked to provide input. Okay. But their procedural history only goes back to November 2022. What is pertinent is what happened after the Sheffield case back in the 80s, because the changes that the Supreme Court made to the grand jury process after the Sheffield case is how we got to where we're at now. They're going to point to 2022 and 2023 after this. The reason they're pointing to this is because this is after people started pointing out the things that are wrong, and the Supreme Court then recognized their error and started making changes. And they made it in Supreme Court Order Rules 1993 and 2000, but it didn't actually fix anything. Okay. So you can read through this and it kind of gives you the history behind this. And I don't necessarily disagree with any of the history here, the recent history. I just want to be able to provide the context that says there is more history than what's being presented here. And for decades, the courts and the lawyers, and this is why you've got lawyers that don't even understand that the grand jury has a role of investigation. Like prosecuting attorneys were shaking in their boots because somebody in a grand jury says, I want to investigate something. I want to present something. They don't even know what to do because an entire generation of lawyers was never trained. They never grew up in the Alaska state judicial system dealing with a grand jury that's going to investigate. Okay, so let's get to the summary of the major changes. So this is, you're not going to see underlines or strike throughs. This is a summary. Okay, this is like the executive summary. This is helpful, but it's not 100%. So if you want to know exactly what's going on, you're going to have to scroll down and read through the actual rules. But this summary gives us a snapshot of what's happening. So all of the commentary in the rule is removed. So it's interesting the way that the courts do it. They'll put the rule out there, and the rule starts with a capital letter and ends with a period, right? It's a sentence, it's a paragraph, it's a bullet. Following all of the bullets, and they've completed their rule, then there's a paragraph that's sometimes in italics or always in italics or in parentheses or something, but it identifies itself as a commentary. And this is what I would compare it to is the legislative intent that comes from the legislature. So it isn't actually the statute, but it's the legislative intent that goes with the bill that says, well, this is how we would really like to see it implemented, right? So there's commentary in the rules that they removed. Okay, so let me just really quickly jump over to the okay, so this is the court rules. Okay, we're looking at 6.1 right now. Okay, so here's commentary. This is going to be kind of your intent language for judges on how to implement the actual rules that they implement, okay? So what they're saying is all of this commentary is deleted. They're getting rid of it, okay? Well, jumping back over to the request for comment. Okay. Second bullet, the rule language in subsection A explaining issues that fit within the public welfare and safety is removed. Okay, so I happen to know what that's meaning, what that's referring to is the Supreme Court Order 1993 and 2000 modified and they tried to define what's fit for public welfare or safety. And it also was in the commentary. So not the legislature, the judicial branch, the judges were trying to direct the grand jury that they can only investigate things that is public welfare or safety, and then they defined what's public welfare and safety, and it limited it to the point where if you were trying to look at corruption within the judicial system or how the Department of Law was handling a case, you wouldn't have been able to do it because that wasn't for public welfare. Heaven forbid we investigate the courts or the Department of Law. That wouldn't be in the public welfare, right? So anyway, so that's deleted. That's a good sign. That's a really good sign. The process, third bullet, the process to request an investigation, both for a grand juror, so you're a member of a grand jury, and for non-grand juror, which is a member of the public. So that's changed. The process has changed. So now you would say, okay, let's make sure. Now we need to know what the process is changing to. The process that existed was if you were a non-grand jury member, you had to go to the Attorney General. Hey, Mr. Attorney General, I would like to present to the grand jury. And then the Attorney General would decide whether you were going to get to or not. So the court's doing away with that in the court rules. In summary, what they are saying, their process they would like it to be, is a grand juror can propose an investigation directly with the other grand jurors. Okay? Got no problem with that. It's great. A non-grand jury member, a member of the public, can file a request with a superior court. So wherever you're residing, you can go to the superior court, ask to present to the grand jury. The request goes to the presiding judge, who transmits it to a seated grand jury. A non-grand juror, so a member of the public must be a resident. Okay, so far so good. Now the grand jury is going to receive something from the presiding judge, a notification that there's somebody who wants to talk to them, and the grand jury is the one that's going to decide whether they want to hear it or not. For both grand juror and non-grand juror requests, the Attorney General assigns an attorney to provide advice and assistance to the grand jury on whether to investigate a matter concerning the public welfare and safety and any subsequent investigation. Okay, so here's where the summary is kind of sending a red flag up. Okay. I happen to know that the conversations that I had with attorneys in the Department of Law at the very top really would like us to have two different types of grand juries. One of them is a grand jury that the district attorneys control and just does indictments. And then a separate grand jury that just does investigations. You can't mix the two. You have a grand jury that indicts people, and you have one that investigates, but you can't have a grand jury that investigates and indicts. You can see the problem that might, for somebody who doesn't want to get indicted, like the government, they might have a problem with that. So this to me sends up a little bit of a red flag, but I'm only reading the summary, so I'm gonna have to go to the actual rule change to see what it actually means. Okay, so the rule change here is not going to cannot direct the Attorney General to do anything, right? This is the judicial branch. The Attorney General works for the governor in the executive branch. So the court rule is not really going to be able to direct the Attorney General to do anything. But if there's an agreement between the Attorney General and the courts, which it appears that there probably is, I don't know. That may be a bad assumption on my part. The Attorney General assigns an attorney to provide advice and assistance. That's no different than a district attorney is right now by statute. And I can show you the statute where that's the responsibility of the district attorney. Like, it's already in the statute. So to say this in a court rule is just reinforcing statute. Okay, next bullet. The evidence standard for an investigation is changed. It is different than Criminal Rule 6S. The grand jury may hear inadmissible evidence in its investigative phase. Okay, this is another red flag. A separation or a differentiation between investigative and indictment phase. Okay, so we got to make sure that we keep those two concepts separate and figure out how they're going to be approaching that with the rules. At the end of the day, a grand jury that investigates and finds some crime needs to be able to indict. So let's figure out how they're going to work that. The grand jury may hear inadmissible evidence in its investigative phase. The grand jury's factual findings in its report must be based on admissible evidence. Okay. So let's talk about what this means in practice. What it's saying is the grand jury can have anybody come in and talk to them. They can have access to any papers, even if those papers would be inadmissible or that testimony would be inadmissible in court during the trial. Okay. If the grand jury is going to publish a report, the only thing that can go into the report is admissible evidence. So one of the things that I think about in my mind when I hear admissible and inadmissible is hearsay. A judge is going to decide whether information that's presented during trial is admissible, or they will strike it if it's inadmissible because it's hearsay. So hearsay is, I heard an employee or my coworker say X, Y, and Z, and I'm the one giving testimony. Okay, so whatever that coworker said is hearsay, and it's not admissible in court. It may help the grand jury and an investigator figure out what the truth of the matter is, because then I would go and talk to that person. But if I can't find them for some reason, or they're unavailable, or they died, then there's no more investigation there, right? You can't pull on that thread and go find more information. So what's going to be a challenge here is that if the grand jury is going to try to put information out to the public that it thinks is important, but the court is going to decide that it's inadmissible. So how does that work? Who actually decides what information is considered admissible and in a public manner. The grand jury could put any number of things in a report, and the judge, if they're the gatekeeper on that report, looks at it and says, yeah, points 1 and 2, good to go. Points 3, I don't like. I'll just consider that inadmissible, and it'll be struck. And no one's going to know why, because no one will ever see it. So the inadmissible, the definition of inadmissible and the actual mechanics of deciding what verbiage in the report is inadmissible and proving to the public that it was legitimately inadmissible, well, that means you got to trust the judge. But this is the process. What if the judiciary is the part that's being investigated? The judge just gets to decide that something is inadmissible, and then it's struck from the report. Again, if you go back to the Constitution, the ability of the grand jury to issue a report on the public safety and welfare shall not be suspended. If the only thing that you can put in the report is admissible evidence, and the judge is going to decide what that is, then that means by definition there's something that may not be able to be reported on, and that portion is being suspended. A new provision is added that the grand jury may not disregard information that would tend to rebut its recommendations. And the grand jury must subpoena evidence necessary for a full and fair consideration of the issues in its report. Interesting. Why would this be in here? Why would the courts be concerned about this? How would the judge know? How would this be controlled? How would it be? Who would have the say to say, well, the grand jury should have subpoenaed this other person over here? Who gets to make that call? The judge? The grand jury must subpoena evidence necessary for a full and fair What's full and fair? This is 12 to 18 members of the public, and one judge is going to tell them, well, that wasn't full and fair. You've got to go subpoena this other person over here. This is a way to control the grand jury. I don't even know how it is enforceable. Whatever's happening in the grand jury is secret. The new provision says the grand jury must not disregard information that would tend to rebut its recommendations. Okay. How would you know that they are doing it? How would you know that they're disregarding it? Because the ultimate report comes out and somebody decides that they disregarded information? Okay, well, how do you know what information they used and what they didn't? If it's not included in the report, you've got the information on the outside, and judge is making a decision that says the grand jury should have looked at this information. How do you know that they didn't just because it wasn't in the report? I'm a little confused here about how the judge is going to make the enforcement of the grand jury here to ensure that the grand jury does what the court system says that they're supposed to do in their deliberations. A grand jury must subpoena evidence necessary for a full and fair consideration. So one of the concepts that we do need to recognize here, a district attorney that brings an indictment, a case to the grand jury, if that district attorney has exculpable information that would lead to the grand jury to believe that maybe that person shouldn't be indicted, that information is supposed to be presented to the grand jury as well. Meaning if there's information that gives is beneficial to that person, that information is supposed to go to the grand jury. I take this bullet to kind of mean something similar to that. If the grand jury is going to be looking at some particular agency within state government, then they don't need to just cherry pick the data that they are investigating. They need to take a holistic look, and they need to look at all of the information and be reasonable. Look at everything, be thorough. Okay. If that's the intent behind the bullet, then I understand that. But from a practical matter, who gets to decide whether a grand jury did that? And furthermore, what happens when you decide that they didn't? Is that grounds for the report not being released? Because then the judge can always just overrule the grand jury and say, you didn't do what I think you should do, and therefore we're not going to release your report. A grand jury's report, going to the next bullet, a grand jury's report must be based on factual findings supported by a preponderance of the evidence admissible under the evidence rules. A grand jury's report cannot be admitted as evidence in a proceeding. Okay. This is circular logic. Okay. This does not make sense. This has to be rewritten. Or the summary is wrong. So I go to the actual text, right? Let's go back up. The grand jury may hear inadmissible evidence, but the grand jury report can only be based on admissible evidence. Okay, do you see the circular logic already? If the grand jury can only report inadmissible evidence in its report, then this bottom statement here, the grand jury's report must be based on factual findings. Well, it is, because it's based on admissible evidence, supported by a preponderance of the evidence, admissible under the evidence rules. Okay, so we're saying that it is. That's what their bullets are saying. I don't know who's going to decide that, but that's what their bullets, their rule change is saying. A grand jury's report cannot be admitted as evidence in a proceeding. Okay, well, if your report is following what the judge wants, what the judiciary wants, and the report only has admissible evidence, then why would you exclude the report from a proceeding? And the proceeding is the court case, evidence in a court case. So here's the thing. Talking to attorneys, talking to the Department of Law, they're worried that a grand jury is going to taint their indictment. And they would taint the indictment by asking questions that would lead them to information that's inadmissible in court. And then that inadmissible information led them to a positive indictment, a yes indictment. Okay. And then somebody would figure that out, and they would claim in the court case that they need to throw out the indictment because the grand jury considered it inadmissible information. Okay. Go to the Constitution and tell me where it says the grand jury can only consider admissible information in choosing to indict somebody. It's not in the Constitution. So if this is a court rule situation, then somebody's going to have to explain to me why the grand jury again, the grand jury does not work for, make my face big on this for a second. The grand jury does not work for the district attorney. The grand jury does not work for the court. The grand jury has a requirement to defend the victim and defend the accused. The grand jury is a fact-finding organization. It is a group of people that is looking for what it assumes is the truth to proceed in a trial, to take somebody's liberty and put them on trial. It doesn't have any power other than that. So the grand jury comes in and the district attorney presents information to them. Every member of that grand jury needs to be skeptical of what the DA is saying. You're not there to make the DA's job easier. You're not there to be the rubber stamp for the district attorney. You're there to ask questions. You're there to figure out the truth of the matter. if it's not an indictment that you're investigating and it's something else, it's an issue that is not where it doesn't lead to an indictment, it just leads to a report, then why in the world would it matter whether there's inadmissible evidence or not? This is basically saying that if the grand jury steps out of what the district attorney is presenting and they do any sort of investigation, that grand jury's report can't be used as evidence in a proceeding. So this is a control piece here. Now, obviously, I'm gonna have to go read the actual rule change to make sure that the summary is accurately reflecting what the rule change is saying. But this is a control piece. This is a control piece. Grand jury cannot return an indictment related to the matter. It is investigating. The grand jury cannot return an indictment related to the matter it is investigating. Instead, it can issue a bill of proposed charges to the prosecuting attorney. I would direct the courts to AS 1240-070. Don't you just love it when you know what the law says? I'm going to show you because I know how to get to it really, really quick. Well, maybe not really, really quick. Maybe just real quick. Okay, here it is. Man, I know what I'm talking about. Make this bigger. Okay, AS 1240-70. Duty of the prosecuting attorney. We've already covered this in a previous episode, right? Subsection 3. This is what I said last night. This is what they're ignoring. Now the judiciary is ignoring it. The duty of the prosecuting attorney is a shall. The prosecuting attorney shall, when required by the grand jury, prepare an indictment and attend their sittings to advise them in relation to their duties or to examine witnesses in their presence. This is the grand jury's power to tell the district attorney to prepare an indictment. I wish I could have both of these up at the same exact time, but I don't think I can do that. This says the grand jury cannot return an indictment. It is investigated. Instead, it has to issue a bill of proposed charges to the prosecuting attorney to have probably a second district or a second grand jury look at the case. Okay, the statute literally says the grand jury can tell the prosecuting attorney to drop an indictment. That's the law. This court rule can't go against that. Okay, current subsections F and G addressing judicial review and release of the report are overhauled. Okay, this is good. Presiding judge no longer conducts an initial review of the report to ensure it complies with the standards and requirements of the rule. Good. Instead, the automatic initial review is replaced with an objection-driven process. A person with a substantial interest, okay, great. Who defines what a substantial interest is and how does that person get notified? So a person with substantial interest likely to be affected by the release of the report is notified. Okay. Again, we're looking at the summary, so maybe it spells it out in the rule. That person may file an objection to the report. The person may submit additional evidence if it is material. A governmental subdivision or agency is now a person. Ooh, that last one is. Interesting. Okay, so looking at the rule, what's going to happen is if somebody submits additional information because they're a substantial interest, then the judge is going to have the ability to send the report back to the grand jury and say, hey, here's additional information. You need to incorporate it into your report. Or they're going to add it as an addendum afterwards, like an annex. Now, let's deal with this. A governmental subdivision or agency is now a person under rule who can file an objection. Okay. This means that if the grand jury's target, if they're investigating actual department or division within a department, an office, let's say it's OCS, and they're investigating OCS for something, okay? OCS is now going to be considered a person under this rule. So OCS will be able to object to the issuance of this report, and they'll be able to submit additional evidence. I'm going to go to the second bullet, and then we're going to go look at the actual text because it's important to this. Any person, not just a person with a substantial interest, identified in a report can file a response to the report. The response will be attached to the report as an appendix. Okay, so if you're not a substantial interest, and you can file a report if you're named in there, and it'll be listed in the appendix. Okay, let's jump down real quick. Okay, so here's the actual change. We were almost there, right? Let's finish the bullets and then we can move on. A witness who testified before the grand jury can request that their name be redacted from the report, and the presiding judge will issue a ruling on the request. Okay, understood. Okay. All right, so changes to the rule. Again, what I said before, all of the underlined are adds, all of the strike throughs just as common sense as a deletion, it's being removed. Okay, I want to jump to the section that's talking about this judicial review, because this is the quintessential problem with the Kenai grand jury report not being released. So let's look for the judicial review. Commentary, deleted. Maybe I went by it already. Majority required. Subpoenas. Nope, we're not there yet. Okay, initial review. So they're going to strike all of this. It's all struck. That's not it. Okay, so this is on the judicial. Okay. The grand jury may request that the presiding judge extend its period of service to conduct an investigation. If the grand jury service is extended, the presiding judge shall discharge the grand jury when the grand jury determines it will not issue a report, or if the grand jury issues a report and after the presiding judge concludes any proceedings on an objection and the grand jury's report is released. Okay. The following procedures apply to the release of a grand jury report and objections to the report. So this is the crux of the problem with the Kenai grand jury. This is their fix, okay? Well, I don't know whether it fixes it, but this is what they're doing. The grand jury shall present its report to the presiding judge. The foreperson is the only one that has to be there. Except as provided below, the report and any appendices shall be filed with the clerk. Okay, that's performative. The presiding judge shall review the report and determine if a person has a substantial interest. Okay, so we answered our question. At least one of the questions. What substantial interest is, hopefully it's defined elsewhere. And that's probably a legal term. Substantial interest is probably a legal term that has a legal definition to it. I'm not an attorney, right? But we can figure that out. The presiding judge shall review the report. Still, the presiding judge is a gatekeeper here in a sense. So they're only going to be looking for a substantial interest. And let me just pause for a second and say, if I'm the presiding judge and we're going to have grand jury investigations, I really don't want more reports on my desk. Like, there's enough going on in the court system for these judges that adding the role of the judge as the gatekeeper and having to parse through grand jury reports is probably not something a judge really wants to do. All right, so the judge is going to look for who has a substantial interest if the report is released, okay? A person has a substantial interest that is likely to be affected by release of the report or the interests of justice. That's an interesting statement. That's discretion right there. Otherwise require it. So I would bet the interests of justice is also a legal concept or a legal term, and it's going to give the judge latitude or discretion to decide if a person has substantial interest or if they're going to be affected by the release of the report. If so, okay, otherwise, the presiding judge shall delay release of the report and allow the person to lodge a written objection. Okay, so it's not necessarily authorizing the judge to hold the report, just delay it. And now you're going to get a written objection. Okay, so in the interest of being fair, don't have a problem with that. It may delay the report, but it doesn't stop it. And if I'm a member of the public, I want to see all the information. If the grand jury report is not complete or it has additional information or context, then I would like to see that. If the presiding judge delays releasing the report, the presiding judge shall direct the attorney for the grand jury to serve the report and a notice of the right to object on the person. Interesting. So people are going to get served, and now it starts a clock. The attorney shall file proof of the service with the court. The presiding judge shall further order that any person served with a copy of the report shall not disclose the report or information in the record to any person except an attorney representing the person. I don't know how that's going to be enforceable. Can you imagine? That's not going to be enforceable. I mean, I guess you could hold someone in contempt of court if they release the information, but the damage is already done. That is going to be tricky. I'm going to have to give that some more thought, but I don't know how you enforce that. Any person raising an objection under this subsection may, for good cause shown, examine the record. The person shall have 30 days from the date of service to file an objection to releasing the report. In the objection, the person must designate the page, paragraph, line. Okay. Yeah, this is directions. The objection must also specify the section of the rule that was not followed or the basis. Okay, so we're being technical here. The attorney for the grand jury shall have 10 days to respond to any objection filed. Okay, so that clock has started. The presiding judge may hold oral arguments on the objection of any response to the oral argument is confidential. The report and any proceedings in an objection under this subsection shall remain confidential until the presiding judge issues a final ruling on the objection. In ruling on an objection under paragraph 2, the presiding judge shall apply the standards in this rule and administrative rule 37. I don't know what that rule is. I'll have to look that up. Okay, then the issues the findings supporting the decision. Okay, so if A doesn't apply, then B does. If the person objecting to the report presents additional evidence, the judge must determine if the additional evidence is material to the report. Man, so much discretion here. So if so, the presiding judge shall return the report to the grand jury to consider additional evidence. So if it's material to the report goes back to the grand jury and the grand jury has to consider it. If the person objecting to the report does not produce additional evidence, the presiding judge may order the report to be released in full, designate portions of the report as confidential, meaning it's redacted, designate the entire report as confidential, meaning the entire report would be redacted, or return the report to the grand jury with an explanation for the reasons of returning the report. Okay. So if the person that the judge identified as as a material interest or what was the legal term? If the judge decides somebody's going to be materially affected, but that person doesn't object to the report, they don't produce additional evidence, then the judge has the discretion to protect that person or not. And they're going to protect them by either redacting part of the report or the whole report, or returning it to the grand jury. I3. So in response to the presiding judge ruling in paragraph I3 above, the grand jury may conduct further proceedings. Okay, so if the report gets returned to them, they can continue their investigation, revise the report, or seek an appellate review so they can appeal to the next higher judge. If the grand jury issues a revised report, the presiding judge must determine if the deficiencies in the prior report were corrected. So basically, you'll have to do what the judge says, or he's not going to allow it to be released. They are so scared that the grand jury is going to start investigating our centers of government, and people are going to lose their jobs over this. They're so scared of this. Any person identified in a report may file a response to the released report. Any factual assertions contained in the response must be made under penalty of perjury. The response shall be made in appendix to the report. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. Any witness who testifies before the grand jury may request redaction of his or her name and personal identifying information from a final report that will be released under this rule. Okay, that's good information. Any request or redaction shall be made on the record. Presiding judge shall apply the provisions of the administrative rule to any request for this under this subsection. The provision shall not be construed to confer on a witness a right to receive a copy of any report prior to its release. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So the court has gone to great lengths to find a way for the judge to control what the grand jury is going to be able to release. I have to go one more place. Hate to do this to you again, but we got to go here. So our Declaration of Rights say that we have a right. We have a right as Alaskans. We have the power to investigate and make recommendations concerning public welfare, and that right shall never be suspended. So what we just read was that power that can't be suspended can be curtailed by the judge. So what's the point of doing an investigation and putting out a report that gets redacted to the point where you don't know what's in it? What's the point? The point of the constitutional provision that we just looked at was that the grand jury gets to investigate the government. It gets to investigate for the public welfare, meaning whatever the grand jury believes is a public welfare with regard to our government is public welfare. Not what a judge thinks is public welfare. It's what those 12 people think is public welfare. That's our right as citizens of the state of Alaska to be a member of the grand jury. We get to investigate. We get to issue reports on the public welfare. If that report is redacted by a judge, then we have part of our right suspended. I am standing my ground. Rule 6.1 needs to be removed entirely. This portion of this addition, this modification, what was the word that they used for it? It's not modification. They said it was, get it all the way up here. Sorry. The court said that they modified, I think is what the word that they used. It doesn't matter. Anyway, they're saying that this is it's modified. The rule has many other changes. The bold simply okay, yeah. So they're just saying it's modifying it. So Rule 6.1 has been modified. I stand my ground. I think Rule 6.1 just needs to be eliminated. Here's the grounds. We all agree to live underneath this Constitution and this form of government that we have, and we're living peacefully with it, okay? There's a whole lot of corruption that's going on in our state government, and we're living with it. We have to tolerate it because nobody's doing anything about it. Those people who are involved in the OCS system, they know what I'm talking about. Nobody is doing a damn thing about the problems in OCS. A grand jury could do something about it. Grand jury can't fix it. A grand jury can investigate and issue a report that could be scathing on bureaucrats. Could be scathing on members of the public who are doing things wrong. There's a lot going on within OCS, okay? But nobody's doing anything to fix it. So you send a grand jury in there who's got subpoena power, and they can look at any document that's in the OCS. And as long as you're protecting the identities of kids, that grand jury can issue a report that highlights a whole bunch of ugliness. And then the public reads it, and the public gets upset. And then they go to their legislator and they say, legislator, we got to fix this. Or they go to the governor and they say, Governor, WTF. Fix this. But until you have a grand jury report that details what's happening, the status quo happens, which is to say nothing happens. As we highlighted at the Department of Law issued supplemental budget requests for additional money because they use their discretionary funds and they need more. Okay, well, there ought to be an investigation as to why that is. In every department that has that situation, there ought to be an investigation. Why can you not budget the money that you have? Maybe there's legitimate reasons and the report comes back and says, hey, yeah, folks, this agency needs more money. Maybe that's what the report of the grand jury says. If the judge holds the power to redact all of the negative, all of the things that are going to cause bureaucrats to lose their jobs, then why even go through this exercise? Why have it in the Constitution that says a grand jury can investigate? You don't need it. It just neuters the effect of the grand jury. So these summary of major changes these major changes in 6.1, in my opinion, are not helpful. Some of them are. Some of them are helpful. Where we get down to the concept of checking the report. Remember, the very entity that has refused to release a report is changing the rules to still give themselves power to decide what gets released in the report. there's this this feeling inside of me that's just welling up, and I could get excited right now. This is the similar feeling when I recognize somebody who's bullying somebody else. It is this feeling that I've gotten since I was a teenager when I saw bullies doing bully things. This is our judicial system bullying the people. We know best. We can't have a grand jury investigating the government and releasing information that's going to cause people to get fired or put negative light on public employees. We can't do that. All right. So let's go back to that screen because we just looked at the information, but you need to know what to do with it. Okay. So, whoops, go back to the, not that one. Go back to this one right here. Blow it up. Sorry, go to the other screen. Okay. So you can go find the rules and read them for yourself. And then they've got a survey and your comments get emailed. Excuse me. Your comments get emailed to rule comments, all one word, rule comments at akcourts.gov. Or you can mail them. You can put them in the snail mail if you want to, if you don't have internet access. That's court rule change public comments, care of Stacy Steinberg, Alaska Court System, 820 West 4th Avenue, Anchorage, Alaska, 99501. Okay, so your comments are due by Monday, April 6th, 2026. If I were you, I would communicate to the court system that the court rules need to reflect that the judge does not have the right to redact a report. Here's my logic. People are doing bad things out there. I don't think a grand jury report is going to prevent all bad things from happening. Just like we can create laws and all bad things don't happen. But somebody goes out there and assaults somebody, they know that that's against the law and they're going to have to pay for it. All it takes is somebody to say something and then there's an investigation and somebody is going to come and put you in jail. Same thing with other bad crimes, murder and theft and all of that, right? Our society knows that it's a problem. You do bad things, you go away. You're going to serve jail. Our government doesn't have that fear right now. A redacted report is not going to give them that fear. An under-redacted report released is going to give them that fear. We have a constitutional process set up where 12 to 18 members can investigate into our government. Okay? The same members get to decide whether you are likely to have committed a crime and cause you to be indicted. And if you aren't already arrested, the troopers can go out and arrest you. They can deprive you of your liberty. And if the judge says that you're not going to be released from jail until your trial, then you stay in jail until your trial. If we can trust those 12 members to deprive us of liberty, then we can trust them to make decisions about investigating government and what needs to be included in a report, which is far less important than whether you're going to deprive somebody of liberty. The court is in fear of a grand jury that can investigate the court, that can investigate the judicial system, and issue reports that make bureaucrats look bad. That is what they're fearing for their jobs right now. Their court rule changes here need to nip this in the bud. The grand jury can be trusted to issue a report. I will go so far as to say that a period of time that a judge can identify who's in the report, and a period of time can allow those who are in the report to write a rebuttal. Whether you're a person identified in the report or whether you're an agency, you can identify a rebuttal. Those rebuttals get added to the back of the report as an appendix, and then the report gets released. Nothing else gets redacted. Let the people see what the people's representatives on the grand juries investigated and sent out and felt was necessary that the public needed to see. If there's rebuttals that need to happen, fine. Let the rebuttals happen. That way the public's got both sides of the issue. Let the public decide what needs to happen, because the so what of this is the agency, the bureaucrat is either going to fix themselves or they're going to get fired, or the public is going to go to the governor or go to the legislature and say, fix this. But if you redact it, if you allow the judge to redact it and reduce the damage that's done through the report, right, from their perspective, reduce the information that the public has, then you can't do that. That the result you don't get the same result. So the only thing that I'm willing to support here is a period of time is allowed for those people who are named in the report and who may affect adversely, that they get an opportunity to rebut what the grand jury has said. That's it. You add it to the report and you send it out to the people. I think that would be keeping within the constitutional authority of the grand jury to issue a report, because you want to have all of the pertinent information. And I would love to see what the rebuttal is, or the justification that the grand jury is pointing to and says, hey, look, there's wrongdoing over here. I want them to issue a rebuttal. Give us your written record of why the grand jury's wrong. Give us that. Put it on the record. Make it public. I want to see that. Let the people decide. Ultimately, they decide at the ballot box. But the pressure can be applied to our government, our elected officials, to fix the problems that the grand jury highlights. How else are we going to address the problems in our government if we do not have the details and the facts? How else are we going to address it? Wait for the legislature or arrangement in our government? This is the way, folks. This is the tool that we have at our disposal to fix